we actually envision a world that much more closely resemble, if you remember, Jillian, Willy Wonka, the Wonkavator.
This is the great glass Wonkavator.
It's basically an elevator that instead of being bound to a single building, it can go.
Sideways and slantways and long ways.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching and listening to the PropsClear podcast. I'm your host, Jillian Angeline. If you've been enjoying this content, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can get notified about future episodes. Now we're talking all about drones and about how to improve public perception surrounding the unmanned aircraft industry. These episodes are for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only, so none of this constitutes legal advice. Fasten your seatbelts and let's get started. Today's guest is Dan Sloat. He's the founder at the Advanced Air Mobility Institute, and he's also the CEO of Volatus Infrastructure and Energy Solutions. So, Dan, thank you so much for joining me. Really excited to get this on the books and to talk all about AAM. It's definitely a buzzword, especially in the unmanned aircraft world that we're living in. First of all, for anyone who doesn't even know what the term AAM is, what is advanced air mobility?
So the way that we typically describe advanced air mobility at the AM Institute is a revolutionary new form of transportation. We utilize electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft as well as uncrewed aerial system platforms in order to more safely, efficiently, and sustainably move people, goods, and ideas.
One of the things I loved, one of the quotes you have in one of the many articles that you've been, interviewed on, you say, we as a society have figured out the power to weight ratio for electric batteries such that we can make supersized drones that are strong enough to carry human passengers. And that's a phrase, supersized drones. I love that phrase because I think that that is one of the easiest ways to explain it to someone who may not necessarily understand or hasn't been in this world and constantly hearing conversations about AAM. Basically, these giant unmanned aircraft, giant robots that will cut down on congestion on the roadways, make travel safer because it may be, like I've read, in more water areas, like a city like Boston, closer to the water, or an area like Seattle that relies on ferries. So tell me about what kind of experience you've had in the AAM world as the founder of this institute.
Certainly. I hear quite often, as you pointed out, the benefit of reducing traffic congestion on the ground.
Hmm.
I would certainly love to see that. I think that we'll have to see a pretty spectacular scale up of these vehicles to be able to have a perceptible decrease in uh, automobile traffic. But for the individuals who do make use of this as passengers, it promises to reduce their individual commute times pretty dramatically. It's looking, of course, that varies dramatically by the scenario and the routing, destination, and so forth. But on average, you can expect anywhere you can get by car today could be cut down in as much as 1/4 of the time. So it's very exciting. Obviously, that has enormous implications for cargo logistics.
Hmm.
I'm particularly excited about all of the various use cases that support public safety, in particular, any of the emergency medical use cases. This is very much my life's passion. I've been looking forward to advanced air mobility since at least 2010. I couldn't have guessed that that was the name that it would take on, but it's been a real honor to meet so many passionate people around the world who are excited about what the future holds.
Now, back in 2010, you were still in the Air Force. And so, what made you? I mean, obviously, we were surrounded by everything, aircraft. But what made you think one step ahead and say, I think these pilotless vehicles may be the next step?
So you're right. That was during my first deployment. I was in position essentially with responsibility for all uncrewed systems over the eastern half of Afghanistan. The weight of that responsibility was not lost on me, and I was able to see firsthand just how powerful this technology can be,
Mhm.
and seeing that if we can adapt this for civilian use, as of course many technologies that we use today are fielded in military applications,
Mhm.
and it's clear to see that in the aggregate we can expedite the
Yep.
movement of quite a few things while at the same time not adding to our overall CO2 emissions.
That's definitely true. There's the environmental aspect of this as well, where these batteries can be used instead of solely, you know, diesel or
Fossil
gas
fuels.
powered. Correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. And then talk with me about why create an institute. You've spoken all around the world about this. You've got a long list of people who are helping to push the word out across the world. As CEO of Lattice Infrastructure and Energy Solutions, why not just use that platform to push the AAM message? Why create an institute on the side, a nonprofit institute, to talk about this?
So that's an excellent question, Jillian. Uh, the timing is such that we actually started laying the groundwork for the AM Institute back in fall of 2022.
Okay.
And I wasn't brought on as a first. I was brought on as a technical advisor to
Mhm.
Volatus at the very tail end of 2022, and then transitioned to CEO by July. So while some people, I think they assume that the AIM Institute is perhaps an arm of, or vice versa. Um, uh, they are fully distinct and separate organizations. Um, I think I would say why really any for profits not particularly well suited to go out and try to grow public awareness and then ultimately secure public trust is that the everyday citizen, they're not
Mhm.
dumb, right? For profit companies, naturally, they're um, whatever they say on their website is their mission. At the end of the
Mhm.
day, we know that it's to make money,
Mhm.
and naturally, that kind of incentive can lead people to, make claims that perhaps overemphasize benefits and overlook some of the risks involved with adopting any given technology. So we felt that launching this institute would be a great way to express a measure of impartiality, to make sure that we were building a community of people who weren't driven by profits, um, and that they would be best suited to get the message out to their fellow citizens.
What has surprised you most in this journey towards getting the AA Institute up and running?
I think what surprised me most is how the power of the internet has created a scenario in which, while my sense is right, I'm very much in deep with it,
Mhm.
but my sense is that
I would hope
persons.
so, as the founder and president.
Yeah, and certainly, well, if someone were to borrow my phone and kind of scroll through my
Mhm.
LinkedIn, the headlines you would see, you'd think the whole world is kind of going bananas for advanced air mobility, and so there,
Absolutely.
yeah, there can be a bit of an echo chamber, and so it's interesting to think about in absolute terms how
Mhm.
few people actually know about this space and these developments, while at the same time being so global in scope. You know, at any given point in time, if you were to ask me the most exotic country you can think of, I probably have someone in my LinkedIn connection, a first order connection, uh, who fits that bill, who's excited, who has some kind of working knowledge of this space, UAS or EVTOLs, and is excited about the prospects. While the
That's
person to
great.
their left and the person to their right never heard of these acronyms ever before.
It seems like one of the bigger challenges, and I feel like I talk about this in the quadcopter and other drone world too, is the regulations aspect of
Mm,
it. It's the regulations and funding, of course, follow the money trail, but regulations most of all. Even just a quick skim of some of the work that you're all doing at the AAM Institute. This is going to be easier to get off the ground, pun intended, in a place like Seattle where there's not as much helicopter traffic as a place like this, replacing the Staten Island ferry, where, I have a pretty clear view of the Hudson, on a daily basis from where I live, and it's constant. You have military craft doing training runs here, you have police surveillance doing their work in the air. It's a complicated process to add one more layer of hey, let's just throw these air taxis in the sky too.
right.
So is that something that you're also trying to do, is not just, educate the public, but work with leaders to try and work through all these regulations?
Yes, yes. Short answer, we're absolutely trying to identify communities. To your point, Jillian, we hear about the greater New York City metro. I have to assume because, of course, uh, uh, people are just about any hour of the day, people are trying to get to different parts. Um, and there's a concentration of individuals who presumably are a bit more price elastic, right?
Mhm.
Willing to spend more, per passenger mile. Time certainly is money in a city like New York.
Because of course, as this all starts, it won't be like $5 to hop on one of these
Right,
things, right?
right, right.
Something to for everyone to know that it's not going to be like Blade, the helicopter service that flies from Newark Airport to the city. I guess the ultimate goal is to get that price down,
Certainly,
but
certainly.
it's not going to be like that at first.
You're exactly right, and the hope is that if we can reach kind of a critical mass in that classic, hype curve, that with enough people and leveraging economies of scale, that we can get it to a much more reasonable, much more affordable price point. But in the beginning, yes, and that's why we advocate so much for government subsidized public safety use cases. Um, they're certainly going to be in position and have plenty of reason to support those operations because of their objective public good.
Mm,
Um, what's interesting about a city like Seattle is it actually has second to New York City the highest ferry traffic.
mm,
Right, they've got many islands where residents commute
mhm.
into
I
Seattle
could see that.
for work or for school, and overwater routes certainly have a quite an advantage compared to overland because even with the rare mishap, of course, the likelihood that an AAM aircraft were to, crash into a surface vessel exceedingly low. Um, so we think there's a lot of promise with communities, as you said, that have quite a bit of waterfront.
Mhm.
We can take advantage of situations like that.
Do you have some companies in mind that are some of the top companies developing these air taxis across the world? I know there are a number across, some in the US, many around the world. But, have you been talking with these companies as well?
Yes, we're in touch with these companies quite often. In fact, I recently joined as a contributing writer to Rob Report.
Mm,
I see this as a fantastic opportunity to reach many of those very critical early adopters. These are precisely those individuals who, as I referenced earlier, who are in position to embrace new technology,
Hmm.
got a bit more disposable income, and we really need to leverage communities like that, so that again we can build towards something that's a bit more affordable for the rest of us.
Are you excited by this? I mean, you said you've been thinking about this since 2010, so that's almost 14 years that
Yeah.
you've been thinking about this. Does it still get you as excited as it did back in 2010?
Absolutely. If anything, more so, because in 2010 we'd make use of these uncrewed aerial systems, and it was really fascinating to think about how they were piloted.
Hmm.
Many of which were piloted all the way over in a base outside Las Vegas. So to just think about like the sheer communications that were involved is pretty spectacular. But nowadays we're seeing more and more public flights, demos, and it's just becoming more and more real. So yes, if anything, more excitement with every passing month.
Is there something that, people who aren't in this space can do? Let's say they're listening to this podcast. It's the first time they're hearing about something like this. Maybe they've heard about it a little bit in other episodes that I've done. But what do you recommend they do? Should they go out and start, talking about it at dinner conversations? Do you think that would help spread the word and get people interested in this? And maybe just like throw it out there that this isn't such a far fetched concept?
Absolutely, it would be fantastic. Of course, cutting edge technologies like this make for excellent conversation points.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the piece that you shared before the podcast started. It's nice to have those, kind of in your back pocket, like, hey, here's something interesting to discuss. And we need a lot more people to start thinking and wrapping their head around these possibilities. Um, I think from our perspective, because of course, in all these various conferences that I've been very fortunate to speak at and serve on panel, we get some interesting questions. Often the imagery of the Jetsons' future
Yeah.
comes up,
Meet George Jetson.
but we see George Jetson in that opening sequence as the driver, the pilot
Hmm.
of these vehicles. Which actually, it was pointed out that if you look closely, it does appear to be some kind of emission coming out the back end of whatever he calls his aircraft. But it's the kind of thing where there's an awful lot of people who maybe aren't the best trained to operate uh, an automobile, right? Let's be honest. And so the prospect that all of us would start operating ourselves a flying vehicle.
Stop the car, Mrs. Jetson. What?
Yeah, did we ever ask if George Jetson is a Part 61 or a Part 107 pilot before?
We should have. We should dig into that a little bit deeper.
Yeah. Is he
Um,
trained? Was he in the military? We don't know any of that.
right,
But something to
right.
think about. You're right. That's true. Like, it's not like, it's like,
Well,
I don't know.
yeah. I mean, certainly becoming a pilot is an incredible amount of work,
Hmm.
and it's not even just on the front end, earn the license and then you're
Hmm.
good. It's such a heavy responsibility that we have this concept of currency, something that's not present with driving a car at all. I mean, you could go months and months without driving a car, and no one's even going to ask questions about how recently you've done this.
True.
um, we actually envision a world that much more closely resemble, if you remember, Jillian, Willy Wonka, the Wonkavator,
Hmm.
where it's basically an elevator that instead of being bound to a single building, it can go sideways and slantways and upways and so forth. That much more closely resembles how safe this new system can be when we get to those levels of further autonomy. Where just like an elevator today, you could be in conversation, an EVTOL becomes available, you step aboard, and you just plainly continue your conversation with,
Hmm.
and it flies itself. Um, we're trying to reduce unnecessary complications um, that come with piloting. You have to have
Mhm.
a keen understanding of the originating airport with the destination airport,
Mhm.
the obstacles along the way. It takes a lot of effort to make sure that you'll carry this out in a safe and efficient way.
But of course, um, you need someone to put in the route. You need some kind of system where, an ordering of that route is requested or something along those lines. Or, I was just looking at some aircraft this morning, just on some videos where, there's like a trailer where like two pilots go into and then they operate the unmanned aircraft, like
Hmm.
to fly it.
Hmm.
So it's not going to be something like that, but you need to have some kind of back end.
Absolutely, absolutely, and certainly in the initial phase, I'll continue to advocate for a well trained, licensed pilot on board. And
Like the self-driving cars.
yes,
Sometimes, like the Lyfts and Ubers, they had, or at least Lyft, I think they had someone sitting in that seat,
kind of an in
making
case.
sure it could
Yeah,
operate properly. Yeah.
exactly, and I think that approach makes sense for for the foreseeable future. Then, as we continue to develop and collect more and more data, we can increase the autonomy, always with an eye towards ensuring that it is, in fact, safer than with the operator on board.
Hmm.
With remote operations, that will look very, very similar to the operations we carried out in the military. And
Hmm.
then with ever increasing now fully autonomous vehicles, we're going to have very, very robust vehicle to vehicle
Hmm.
communications, uh, vehicle to infrastructure communications, as well as um, perhaps even quantum enabled UAS traffic management systems.
That's interesting.
That's
So some
further out into the future
that's a
there.
little bit further out,
Yeah.
but UTM's part of this whole process.
Yes.
Traffic management is going to be important because you can only get so many in the air before you have to make sure that they're all talking to each other, or that there's some kind of air traffic control of these vehicles to make sure that everything is safe.
Yes.
That I think is definitely something that everyone can get behind.
Yes.
And I know that with your lawyer background, you also want to make sure that there are some safeguards in place, especially as everything gets started, because you want to make sure that there's the term that I'd heard recently about, FAA rules are written in blood,
Mm,
and you want to make sure that everything is safe and orderly,
mm.
because you want to be able to make sure that you can use all of the regulations that the FAA has in place to possibly help this system move along, maybe faster,
Mm.
but at least making sure that everyone stays safe along the way.
Yes, and I will say that, of course, the FAA, among government agencies in the United States and around the world, has, all things considered, pretty sterling record. They do a remarkable job of keeping the flying public safe. You're right. The vast majority of these regulations are a direct result with some kind of mishap. Um, I think that from a legal perspective, lawyers can be doing an awful lot more. Not in, of course, not from the engineering side
Mhm.
of safety, but rather in ensuring accountability. Right, in the rare event that there is some kind of mishap or accident, um, it's important that it be crystal clear who's responsible. And with increasing levels of autonomy, it becomes more and more unclear, um, it's a paradigm shift, right? We've been throughout history, we've looked to some kind of well-trained licensed operator, whether it's a pilot or a ship captain, a train conductor, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very interesting period of history that we're going to start placing more and more of our trust in a very real physical sense uh, in our computers and systems. Now, when my phone crashes, it's an inconvenience,
Mm-hmm.
um, right, for the operating system to freeze and need to restart.
Yes,
These are things we simply can't afford in the context of transportation.
that's a good point. But then some people say that all this extra technology is going to eliminate human error that in the past may have caused issues,
Mm,
and that all this work that everyone's doing to make sure that things are more autonomous is going to help. But you're right. You add, you have to have multiple, I guess, safeguards to make sure that the technology doesn't glitch. Because I mean, I can't count how many times, you hear airlines had like one glitch and it messed up how many flights or
right.
something along those lines, and it impacts thousands of people, hundreds of reservations, hundreds of planes taking off or landing. So you just want to make sure that there are different parameters and, I guess, safeguards and plenty of layers
Absolutely.
that keep things safe. I mean, you've been working with people all around the world. Is everyone on the same page about, AAM, or do you think you know, some have a different viewpoint about this?
There's a very broad diversity of viewpoints, and I find that very exciting. Um, there's a general consensus, of course, that these systems need to be safe. Um, there just seems to be a bit of a difference of opinion exactly how we do that best and most consistently.
Mhm.
But I think that these kind of discussions are very necessary. Um, I
I
would
agree.
I would infinitely prefer that we have um, even heated discussions because the topic is so important, rather than to have everyone so desperately cling to some semblance of harmony to appear to be a united front to the rest of the world. We need to invite the rest of the world into these debates.
I agree. Well, hopefully, this podcast episode will help add more debates, or at least add more education into the world. I don't want everyone fighting over my podcast, but
Sure.
hopefully it'll add more education. People will be more excited about something like this. So thank you so much for your time, Dan. You'll have to keep us posted on all of your different speaking engagements. If anyone wants to find out more, they can follow you on LinkedIn. I know you're very active there, talking about your work to get this message across here in the US and around the world. Is there any other place that people can follow you?
We do our best to keep our website updated, aaminstitute.org. We've got a number of exciting initiatives that are under works right now that we'll be announcing later on in the year. We just hosted the inaugural Global AAM Forum.
Mhm.
It's a virtual conference where we had our board of liaisons, over 30 countries represented, sharing their various
Wow.
perspectives, best practices. Um, Soon we'll be publishing the forum summary report. Um, the forum turned out to be about 4.5 hours. So for anyone who'd maybe prefer to read it at their own pace, the summary report will be available there, and that'll take place on a semi-annual basis. So the next one in July, and we'll continue to grow the board of liaisons, perhaps one day as many as 200.
Oh, that's so exciting. Well, I really appreciate it. That's great news that you're getting the word out. And if you do have any announcements that you'd like to make on the show, please reach out again, because that's always something that I'm open to. And I've offered up other guests as well, that if there are announcements that you want to partner up with and make an announcement on this show, I'm certainly open to that. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Jillian.
If you have topics or suggestions for future episodes or questions for my guests, you can email me, angelswings.jillian@gmail.com. That's ANGELSWINGS.JILLIAN@gmail.com. I'll see you later.